My mother-in-law poisoned my food to prove my deadly allergy was fake. That sentence still doesn't feel real when I say it out loud. Even now, writing it makes my hands shake. But before any of that happened, before hospitals, police, and courtrooms, there was just an allergy. Something I'd lived with my entire life and learned to manage quietly. I've been allergic to shellfish for as long as I can remember. Not the mild kind people casually mention at restaurants. Mine is the kind where my throat tightens, my breathing becomes shallow, and my body goes into full panic mode within minutes. I carry an EpiPen everywhere because I have to. Without it, a mistake can turn fatal very fast. I learned that early on, through emergency rooms, oxygen masks, and doctors explaining anaphylaxis to my terrified parents. So when I met James, I told him about my allergy on our second date. Not dramatically, just honestly. Eating out was always complicated, and I needed him to understand why I asked so many questions about ingredients and cross-contamination. I braced myself for annoyance or disbelief. Instead, he surprised me. James took it seriously immediately. He asked what shellfish included. He asked what symptoms to watch for. He wanted to know where I kept my EpiPen and how to use it. After that, he became careful in a way that made me feel safe without making me feel fragile. He double-checked menus, warned servers, and carried backup EpiPens like it was normal. Being with him felt like a relief I didn't realize I'd been missing. His mother, Linda, was a different story. The first time James mentioned my allergy to her, she rolled her eyes. She didn't ask questions. She didn't look concerned. She laughed and said, "Young people nowadays claim allergies for attention." She said when she was growing up, nobody had allergies, and everyone ate what was put in front of them. James tried to explain that this wasn't a preference or a trend, it was medical. She nodded. But her expression told me she didn't believe a word of it. I tried to smooth things over. I showed her my medical alert bracelet. I explained what happens when I'm exposed. I even offered to have my allergist talk to her if she wanted clarification. She waved it all away. She said doctors would diagnose anything for money. She said people convinced themselves they were sick by reading things online. I smiled politely and told myself she just needed time. The first few family dinners were tense. Linda loved to cook, and she especially loved seafood. Shrimp dishes, fish stews, sauces heavy with shellfish stock. She'd spend hours preparing elaborate meals, and then look personally offended when I couldn't eat them. She'd sigh dramatically and say she forgot about my allergy. Then she'd throw together something quick for me, while making it clear I was an inconvenience. James offered to bring food I knew was safe. Linda called that insulting. She said bringing outside food into her home was disrespectful. Slowly, her comments became sharper. She said I was picky. She said I was dramatic. She said I was using my so-called allergy to control James and make myself special. She told relatives I was ruining family dinners with my demands. Then she started testing me. At first, it was small. She'd swear a dish was safe, then casually mention after I'd eaten a few bites that there might have been shrimp paste in the sauce. But since I wasn't reacting, I must be cured. My heart would start racing. I'd take Benadryl immediately, and sit there monitoring my breathing while she laughed about me being dramatic. If I panicked, she said it was proof it was psychological. If I didn't collapse, she said it proved I was lying. James would get angry. Linda would cry and say she was just trying to help me get over my mental block about seafood. Over time, the testing escalated. Tiny amounts of shellfish began appearing in places they didn't belong. Seasonings tasted wrong. Sauces made my lips tingle. Marinades made my throat itch. Not enough to send me into full anaphylaxis, but enough that I felt it every time. Enough that I needed medication. Linda would watch me closely, almost expectantly, and then smile when I didn't end up in the hospital. She said if I really had a deadly allergy, I'd already be dead. She didn't understand, or didn't care, that allergies have thresholds. James caught her once, adding something to my plate. She said it was just extra seasoning. That was when we stopped eating at her house. We stopped trusting anything she cooked. Linda reacted by telling the whole family I was refusing her food out of spite. She said I was punishing her and trying to isolate James. So she adapted. She started bringing food to our house, insisting she made it specially for me. I refused to eat it. I didn't trust her anymore. Linda cried to anyone who would listen about how cruel I was. James tried setting boundaries, but every conversation ended with her playing the victim. I thought distance would protect me. I was wrong. James's birthday dinner was supposed to be safe. A restaurant. Neutral ground. Linda insisted on ordering for everyone, claiming she knew the menu best. She ordered me a pasta dish and swore it was safe. The waiter confirmed no shellfish. I was tired, hungry, exhausted from fighting the same battle over and over. So I ate it. Within minutes, my throat started closing. And that was the moment everything changed. I remember thinking I was overreacting at first. My throat felt tight. But I'd felt that before. My lips tingled, my chest felt heavy, and there was that familiar pressure behind my eyes, the warning signs I knew too well. I tried to stay calm. Panic makes everything worse. And I didn't want to give Linda another reason to roll her eyes and call me dramatic. But then my breathing changed. Each breath felt shorter than the last, like my lungs couldn't fully expand. My hands started shaking, and I couldn't swallow properly. I looked at James and didn't even have to say anything. He saw it immediately. His chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood up, already reaching for his bag. "EpiPen," he said, his voice tight. People at the table were still talking, still laughing. Linda was mid-sentence, telling someone how sensitive people were these days, when James pushed the injector into my thigh. The pain barely registered. My ears were ringing. Everything felt distant and sharp at the same time. Someone called 911. I don't remember who. I remember James kneeling in front of me, holding my face, telling me to keep breathing. I remember Linda gasping dramatically and saying, "Oh my God, is she really reacting?" Like she was surprised. Like this wasn't exactly what she'd been waiting to see. The ambulance ride was a blur of lights and oxygen masks. A paramedic kept asking me my name and what I was allergic to. Shellfish. I kept saying shellfish. My throat burned like I'd swallowed fire. I remember thinking very clearly that if James hadn't used the EpiPen immediately, I wouldn't be here. At the hospital, everything moved fast. Doctors, nurses, 4S, monitors beeping steadily. Someone explaining that I'd ingested a highly concentrated allergen. Someone else saying I was lucky. That word, lucky, made my stomach turn. James never left my side. Linda showed up later, clutching her purse, playing the role perfectly. Concerned. Confused. Hurt. She kept saying she couldn't believe the restaurant made such a mistake. She said she felt terrible. She said she hoped I was okay. If I hadn't been so exhausted and shaky, I might have believed her. But the nurse didn't. She asked a simple question that changed everything. How did concentrated shellfish extract end up in a dish confirmed to be shellfish-free? Linda froze for just a second. Barely noticeable. Then she blamed the restaurant. Except the restaurant didn't stay quiet. The manager arrived looking pale and terrified, carrying paperwork and security footage. He said they took allergies seriously. He said they kept the plate after we were rushed out because something didn't feel right. He said the kitchen hadn't used shellfish anywhere near my food. Then the video played. I watched myself and James leave the table to go to the bathroom. I watched Linda sit alone. I watched her glance around. I watched her reach into her purse and pull out a small bottle. I watched her pour something into my food and stir it with my fork like it was nothing. The room went silent. I felt cold all over. Police were called immediately. Linda tried to explain it away. She said it was just fish sauce. For flavor. She said she always carried seasonings. The officer asked why someone would bring fish sauce to a restaurant. Linda laughed nervously and said she liked her food a certain way. That's when Officer Lorraine Boyd asked to see her purse. I'll never forget the sound it made when Linda opened it. Zippers. Bottles, clinking softly. Officer Boyd reached inside and pulled out 3 small vials. They weren't grocery items. They had medical labels. Dosage measurements. Her expression changed instantly. "Where did you get these?" the officer asked. Linda didn't answer. Then the notebook came out. A spiral notebook with a blue cover, worn at the edges. Officer Boyd flipped through it slowly. I watched her jaw tighten with every page. Dates. Notes. Observations. Tiny amount in sauce. Subject showed mild reaction. Proving psychological component. Increased dose in marinade. Antihistamine taken. No hospital visit. Mental block confirmed. There were pages and pages of it. 2 years worth of entries. My reactions documented like lab results. Like I was an experiment. I felt sick. This wasn't denial. This wasn't ignorance. This was planning. Officer Boyd didn't hesitate. She said what Linda did constituted attempted murder. The words echoed in my head, heavy and unreal. Linda started crying, saying it was all a misunderstanding. She said she was trying to help me. She said exposure therapy worked for phobias. The officer cut her off. "This is not a phobia," she said. "This is a documented medical condition." Then she put handcuffs on Linda's wrists. I watched them lead her away down the hospital hallway. Linda kept turning back, crying, saying she was misunderstood. Nurses and patients stopped to stare. James stood next to me, his arm around my waist, shaking. When he came back into my room, he broke. He sat next to my bed and took my hand in both of his. His hands were cold, trembling. He kept saying he should have protected me better. He said he should have cut her off years ago when the testing started. His voice cracked over and over again. I told him it wasn't his fault, that his mother made her own choices, but I could see the guilt crushing him anyway. Later that night, the doctor came in with my chart. She told me the amount Linda used could have killed me within minutes. She said repeated exposure over 2 years likely increased my sensitivity. She said I'd probably need to carry 2 EpiPens now. I stared at the ceiling while she talked. Linda didn't just try to prove me wrong. She made my allergy worse. The next morning, my sister Catalina burst into the room, having driven 4 hours overnight. She cried when she saw me. Then she got angry. She paced, said she never trusted Linda, said she had bad energy from the beginning. She asked why I didn't tell her how bad it had gotten. I didn't have a good answer. I was trying to keep the peace, I said. Catalina stared at me and said, "You almost died doing that." And she was right. I thought once Linda was arrested, everything would calm down, that the worst part was over. I was wrong. The poisoning was only the beginning. What came after was quieter, uglier, and somehow even more exhausting. 3 days after I was discharged from the hospital, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. The man on the other end introduced himself as Blake McCarthy, the district attorney assigned to Linda's case. His voice was calm, professional, almost gentle, like he already knew this conversation would be hard. He said he wanted to meet with James and me to discuss the charges and explain what would happen next. We drove downtown together in silence. Blake's office was neat and sterile, all glass and neutral colors. He laid everything out on the conference table like evidence in a documentary. Photos of the bottles, screenshots from the restaurant footage, copies of the notebook. Seeing it all together made my stomach twist. This wasn't just something that happened to me anymore. It was a criminal case. Blake explained that they were filing charges of attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. He said the notebook showed long-term planning, not a moment of confusion. The pharmaceutical-grade shellfish extract showed intent. He said cases like this were rare, but this one was strong. James asked the question I didn't want to think about. How long could she go to prison? Blake said 15 to 20 years, depending on the judge. I didn't feel relieved. I felt tired. Bone-deep tired. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want justice speeches. I just wanted to eat without fear. A week later, James's father called. Kenji asked if we could meet him at a coffee shop near our apartment. When we arrived, he already looked broken. His shoulders were slumped. His hands shook when he stirred his coffee. He said he had no idea Linda had been doing this. He said whenever he was around, she acted supportive, concerned, careful. He said she lied to him for years. Then he said he was filing for divorce. The word hung between us like smoke. He said he couldn't stay married to someone who tried to kill his daughter-in-law. He said he wanted to testify against her. James's face collapsed. I could see the grief hitting him all at once, losing his mother, losing the version of his family he thought he had. Kenji apologized over and over. He said he should have paid more attention. He said he trusted Linda when he shouldn't have. There was nothing I could say to make it better. 2 days later, Linda's sister called me. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't ask if I was okay. She screamed at me for tearing the family apart. She said Linda would never hurt anyone. She said I must have exaggerated. She called me dramatic for making such a big deal over a little seafood. I tried to explain. About the extract. About the notebook. She talked over me. She said family forgives each other. She said I was vindictive for pressing charges. She said prison would kill Linda. She said this was my fault. I hung up shaking. That's when it hit me. There would always be people who believed Linda, no matter how much evidence existed. Truth didn't matter to them. Blood mattered more. Blake called us back 3 weeks later with new information. The shellfish extract from Linda's purse had been analyzed. He explained it wasn't something you could buy casually. It was medical grade. Expensive. Ordered from specialty suppliers. Linda had signed forms acknowledging what it was. She hadn't just snapped. She planned this, knowing that somehow made it worse. I stopped trusting food entirely. I'd make myself lunch and stare at it for 20 minutes. My heart would race. My hands would shake. I lost weight because eating felt dangerous. James tried to help, but even food he prepared scared me. My doctor recommended a trauma therapist. That's how I met Summer Castillo. She explained that my fear made sense. My brain was trying to protect me after being poisoned. She taught me breathing techniques. She gave me small assignments, one meal prepared by James each week. Slowly, carefully. She told me healing didn't mean forgetting what happened. Meanwhile, James started calling relatives. One cousin remembered getting hives after eating Linda's special sauce. An uncle remembered his girlfriend ending up in the ER after Thanksgiving dessert. Story after story surfaced. Different allergies. Same pattern. Linda had been doing this for years. I wasn't special. I was just the one who finally survived with proof. The preliminary hearing was 6 weeks later. The courtroom smelled like old paper and cleaner. Linda sat at the defense table in a nice blue dress, looking harmless. Her lawyer smiled like we were old friends. He tried to paint her as confused, misunderstood, well-meaning. Blake played the video. The judge watched Linda poison my food. Watched her look around to make sure no one was watching. Watched her stir it in. The judge ordered her held without bail. James and I started couples therapy shortly after. At first, every session turned into James blaming himself. Summer stopped us and said something important. We were both victims, but in different ways. His guilt couldn't become my burden. It took time, but we learned how to support each other without drowning. Blake later told us about the psychological evaluation. Linda had narcissistic personality disorder. She genuinely believed she was right. She would never accept responsibility. She would always see herself as the victim. That knowledge didn't bring peace. It brought clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This was who she was. The trial started on a Monday morning in October. I remember that detail because the sky was gray and low, the kind of day that already feels heavy before anything bad happens. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant. Everything echoed. Footsteps, doors closing, whispers. It felt unreal that this was my life now. Linda sat at the defense table wearing a soft blue dress, her hair neatly styled. If you didn't know what she'd done, she looked like someone's gentle grandmother. She didn't look at me when I walked in. Not once. That almost hurt more than if she had. The jury sat along one wall, ordinary people who had no idea how much power they held over my future. Blake gave his opening statement calmly, laying out the facts without emotion. He talked about planning, about intent, about how severe allergies aren't preferences or fears, they're medical conditions that kill people. Linda's lawyer went next. He talked about confusion, about age, about misunderstanding modern medicine. He said Linda believed she was helping. I felt my hands clench in my lap. Helping doesn't look like hiding bottles and taking notes. Witnesses came one after another. My allergist testified first. He explained my medical history going back to childhood. Hospitalizations, EpiPen use, blood pressure drops, oxygen deprivation. He said my allergy was real, documented, and severe. He said repeated exposure could worsen it, not cure it. Then the restaurant manager testified. He described their allergy protocols. He explained why they kept the plate. Then the video played again. Watching it in a courtroom was different. Bigger screen. Slower. More deliberate. Linda looking around. Linda pouring the liquid. Linda stirring my food. I heard someone on the jury gasp. The forensic specialist testified next. He explained the shellfish extract. Medical grade. Expensive. Not something you accidentally carry around. He explained dosage and concentration. He said it could easily kill someone with my allergy. Then Blake called the other victims. The first woman had a severe peanut allergy. She spoke quietly but firmly about ending up in the hospital after eating Linda's special sauce. She said Linda insisted it was safe. She said Linda later joked that she must be exaggerating. The second woman had celiac disease. She talked about being violently ill for days after Christmas dinner. She said Linda laughed and blamed mislabeled packaging. She said she felt stupid for ever trusting her. As each woman spoke, I watched the jury's faces change. Confusion turned into concern. Concern turned into anger. This wasn't one incident. This was a pattern. Then it was my turn. 6 hours over 2 days, I talked about the first dinners, the eye-rolling, the comments, the forgetting. I talked about the itching, the tingling, the Benadryl. I talked about learning to recognize when my body was in danger. I talked about James using the EpiPen while I couldn't breathe. The defense lawyer tried to shake me. He asked if I was dramatic, if I liked attention, if I'd ever exaggerated symptoms. Blake objected. The judge sustained it. I talked about the notebook, about seeing my life reduced to experiments, about realizing someone enjoyed proving I was wrong even if it killed me. Linda stared straight ahead the entire time. The defense tried one last angle. They said Linda was mentally ill, that she didn't understand the consequences, that she never intended real harm. Blake stood up calmly and asked to replay the video one more time. The judge watched it in silence. When it ended, he said Linda's actions showed clear premeditation. He said anyone who would do this posed a danger to others. The jury was sent to deliberate. 6 hours felt like 6 days. James and I sat in the hallway, barely speaking. I watched people come and go. I stared at the floor. I tried not to imagine every possible outcome. When the bailiff finally came out, my heart slammed into my ribs. We went back inside. The jury filed in. The foreman stood, guilty of attempted murder. I felt something inside me finally release. Like a knot I'd been carrying for years loosened all at once. The judge sentenced Linda to 15 years, with parole possible after 10. Mandatory psychiatric treatment. He said her lack of remorse made her dangerous. Linda screamed that it was my fault as they dragged her away. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. After the verdict, everything went strangely quiet. No court dates. No lawyers calling. No constant waiting for the next shoe to drop. The noise that had filled my life for months disappeared, and I didn't know what to do with the silence. James and I moved 3 weeks later. We chose an apartment across town, far from the hospital, far from the courthouse, far from the memories that clung to every street corner near our old place. The new apartment had big windows and a bright kitchen. I remember standing there the first night, looking at the clean counters, the empty fridge, and thinking, this is where I learn how to feel safe again. Kenji helped us move. He checked every ingredient without being asked, reading labels twice, sometimes calling manufacturers just to be sure. He never complained. He never rolled his eyes. Watching him do that made me realize how abnormal Linda's behavior had been all along. The family split after the sentencing. Some relatives understood immediately. They called, texted, sent cards. Others went silent. A few sent messages saying we were cruel for rejecting the plea deal. One aunt said prison would kill Linda and that I should have been more forgiving. I stopped responding. Therapy became part of my routine. Summer helped me understand that trauma doesn't disappear just because danger is gone. My brain still remembered what it felt like to choke, to panic, to wonder if the next bite would be the last. She reminded me that healing wasn't about rushing back to normal. It was about rebuilding trust, slowly. We made rules. I cooked most of my meals at first. When James cooked, he did it with me standing beside him, watching every step. Then I sat in the other room while he cooked. Then I ate without checking every ingredient myself. Progress was slow, but it was real. The first time I ate at a restaurant again, I cried in the bathroom afterward. Not because something went wrong, but because nothing did. James and I fought sometimes, not about Linda, but about everything else. Laundry, schedules, stress. And that was strangely comforting. It meant we were finally arguing like a normal couple, not like two people surviving a crisis. One night, James admitted something that surprised me. He said part of him still mourned the mother he thought he had. Not the woman who poisoned me, but the idea of her, the version he grew up with. I told him that grief didn't make him disloyal to me. It made him human. We learned how to hold space for both truths at the same time. A year after the poisoning, I started a small blog about living with severe allergies. I didn't expect anyone to read it. But people did. Hundreds of them. They shared stories about family members who didn't believe them, about doctors who dismissed them, about nearly fatal tests disguised as accidents. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. James and I talked about the future over breakfast one Sunday morning. Kids, boundaries. Teaching them that no is a complete sentence. Teaching them that love doesn't ignore danger. I still carry 2 EpiPens everywhere. Probably always will. But they don't feel like symbols of fear anymore. They feel like tools. Protection. Power. Sometimes I think about Linda in prison. About how she still believes she was right. About how she still thinks she was misunderstood. And then I think about the people she can't hurt anymore. That's when I know we did the right thing. I didn't destroy a family. I survived someone who tried to kill me. And I finally learned that my life is worth protecting, even if it makes other people uncomfortable.